Heinrich Himmler stands in the north tower of Wewelsburg Castle, his breath pluming in the frigid air of a winter's night in 1941. He stares down into a crypt built for 12 SS knights, a faint, serene smile curving his lips as if listening to a promise whispered from the dark green sunwheel mosaic on the polished marble floor. A promise of a victory that, by every rational military calculation, is already beginning to slip through his fingers. This wasn't a secret hobby. It was state policy. How could a regime built on industrial slaughter place its ultimate faith in prophecies and magic? When the world you have built is crumbling, when the rational path leads only to defeat, have you never, not even for a second, wished for a secret escape hatch? A forgotten piece of magic? A prophecy that says you are destined to win? What does it say about all of us that the answer is almost certainly yes? To understand what happens next, you need to picture Germany in the 1920s. You cannot see it as a black and white photograph. You must feel it as a living wound. It is a nation not just defeated in a war, but systematically humiliated by the Treaty of Versailles, its pride shattered, its economy in ruins, its people starving and lost. In this vacuum of hope, a dark current of thinking, long simmering beneath the surface of European thought, burst into the mainstream. It was a potent cocktail of nationalism, racial pseudoscience, and occult mysticism. Secret societies like the Thule Society, which reportedly counted high-ranking Nazis among its members, began to preach a new gospel. They taught that the German people, the Aryans, were not merely a nation, but a divine race descended from the godlike inhabitants of a lost, mythical land, Hyperborea, or Thule. This wasn't just folklore. For them, it's a literal biological truth. They believed history was not a series of political or economic events, but a cosmic struggle between their pure, light-filled Aryan race and corrupt, inferior races. The key figure in channeling this into state ideology was Heinrich Himmler, a man who appeared to be a simple chicken farmer, but whose mind was a labyrinth of esoteric beliefs. He, along with others like Rudolf Hess and Alfred Rosenberg, saw the Nazi Party not just as a political movement, but as the vanguard of a new religion that would supplant Christianity. They believed they could reclaim their lost divinity by purifying their bloodline and recovering the sacred relics of their ancestors. This is the critical piece of the puzzle you must hold on to. For these men, the swastika was not just a political symbol. It was an ancient sunwheel, a source of immense power. The SS were not just soldiers, they were a new Teutonic knightly order. And the war was not just a war, it was a holy crusade. The search for occult power was not a distraction from their goals. It was the entire point. But the deepest secrets were still being kept. The belief wasn't just spoken, it was acted upon with the terrifying efficiency of a state apparatus. In 1935, Himmler established the Ahnenerbe, the Ancestral Heritage Society, with a state-funded budget that would eventually run into the millions. You need to see this not as a university department, but as a bizarre fusion of the Smithsonian and a death squad. Its official mission was to find archaeological, anthropological, and historical evidence of the Aryan race's ancient supremacy. Its real mission was to create a scientific-sounding justification for their entire worldview. Ahnenerbe teams were dispatched across the globe on expeditions that seem like fiction. In 1938, an expedition led by Ernst Schaefer was sent to Tibet. If you had seen their mission brief, your blood would run cold. They were not there for diplomacy. They were there to measure the skulls of Tibetan people, searching for traces of an ancient Aryan bloodline they believed had survived in the Himalayas. They were looking for the mythical kingdom of Shambhala, a source of immense spiritual power they hoped to harness for the Reich. Back in Europe, other teams were sent to search for the Holy Grail in the Cathar castles of France. They scoured Iceland for evidence of Thule. They seized ancient Germanic artifacts from museums in every country they occupied. This was systematic, state-sponsored looting, driven by a supernatural shopping list. The centerpiece of this entire belief system was Wewelsburg, the castle you saw Himmler in earlier. He reportedly poured over 13 million Reichsmarks, a staggering sum today, into its renovation. He envisioned it as the future Vatican of the SS religion, a place where the 12 highest-ranking SS generals would meet in arcane rituals, their coats of arms inscribed in the Great Hall. He reportedly designed a gas pipe system running to the central crypt so that upon his death, his body could be ritually burned in the castle's center of the world. While German armies were fighting and dying on the Eastern Front, crucial resources, steel, stone, labor were being diverted to build this occult fantasy. Hitler, for his part, maintained a public facade of skepticism, but his actions told a different story. He was obsessed with the spear of destiny, the lance said to have pierced Christ's side, which he seized from a museum in Vienna the moment he annexed Austria in 1938. He believed that whoever possessed it held the fate of the world in their hands. He also secretly employed astrologers. One of them, Karl Ernst Kraft, had predicted an assassination attempt on Hitler's life in November 1939. When a bomb exploded in a Munich beer hall just minutes after Hitler had unexpectedly left, Kraft was briefly arrested, then brought into the propaganda ministry's fold. His powers were now a state asset. Goebbels used his predictions to craft propaganda that painted Hitler as a messianic figure, guided and protected by Providence itself. Every decision, every military campaign was being filtered through this lens of prophecy and destiny. They were building a reality where faith could override facts. But all of this was just the foundation. They were waiting for one final prophecy, the one that would guarantee their victory, no matter how bleak things looked. The worst part hadn't happened yet. The date is May 10th, 1941. The war is still going well for Germany, but a shadow of doubt is beginning to form. Rudolf Hess, Hitler's deputy Führer, the man who had been with him from the very beginning in the beer halls of Munich, boards a Messerschmitt Bf-110 fighter plane at an airfield near Augsburg. He is alone. He has told no one, not even his wife, where he is going. He flies north, across the German coast, and out over the cold, gray expanse of the North Sea. He is flying to Scotland. This was not a defection in the political sense. It was an act of supreme, mystical faith. Hess, a devout believer in astrology and the esoteric, was convinced that his personal horoscope, combined with a prophetic dream his friend had, signaled that he was destined to broker a peace deal with Britain. He believed he could connect with the Duke of Hamilton, a man he had never met but believed was part of a secret, peace-minded aristocratic faction in Britain. Think about the person you trust most in the world, the one who shares your deepest convictions. Now imagine them taking your shared belief and twisting it into an act of public insanity that threatens to bring everything you've built crashing down. When Hitler was told the news, he did not react with the cold fury of a betrayed commander. He flew into a rage described by witnesses as almost inhuman, a primal scream of disbelief and personal violation. This was heresy. Hess had taken their sacred, secret beliefs and exposed them to the ridicule of the world. Hitler immediately ordered a nationwide crackdown, the Action Hess. He had hundreds of astrologers, faith healers, and occultists arrested overnight, publicly declaring them charlatans and enemies of the state. He had to erase the stain, to pretend the Reich was governed by cold logic, not star charts. But it was a lie. The betrayal forced Hitler and his inner circle deeper into their secret world, making them even more reliant on the prophecies that no one else could be trusted with. Hess had proven that even the most faithful could break. From now on, the magic would have to be kept even closer to the chest. And here's what should make you deeply uncomfortable. This wasn't unusual. The weaponization of faith was not a side effect of the Nazi regime. It was its central operating system. What Hess did as an individual, the entire SS was doing as an institution. Every piece of their occult obsession had a direct, brutal, and systematic application. This wasn't chaos, it was a terrifyingly coordinated system. You need to see the pattern. The Ahnenerbe's expedition to Tibet wasn't just a bizarre field trip. The scientific measurements taken there were used to create racial models. These models were then handed to doctors who used them to justify horrific medical experiments on prisoners in concentration camps, trying to isolate the inferior traits of Jews, Romani people, and Slavs. The search for ancient Aryan artifacts wasn't just archaeology. When they found what they were looking for, like ancient Germanic tapestries or runes, these symbols were immediately mass-produced and integrated into the uniforms and rituals of the SS to create a sense of sacred historical destiny for its members. The belief in a pure, almost magical Aryan bloodline was not a philosophical concept. It was the direct justification for the Lebensborn program, where SS officers were encouraged to father children with racially pure women, creating a new generation of Aryan children who were then raised in state-run homes. Wewelsburg Castle wasn't just Himmler's personal folly. Its design, with its Hall of the Supreme Leaders and its crypt for the SS Saints, was the literal blueprint for a post-war world order. It was a physical manifestation of their belief that they were not building a country, but a new holy empire that would rule for 1,000 years. The system was simple and horrifically effective. First, you invent a mystical truth, that your race is divine, that your symbols hold power, that your destiny is written in the stars. Then you use the full power of the state to find proof for that truth. Finally, you use that proof to justify any atrocity, no matter how monstrous, because you are no longer committing a crime. You are fulfilling a prophecy. But none of that prepared anyone for what they found in the writings of a 16th century French astrologer, a man you know by the name of Nostradamus, and the specific revelation they twisted from his quatrains. What you now understand, and what most people never will, is that this wasn't about winning a war with magic bullets or invisible shields. It was about creating a psychological reality so powerful it could withstand the collapse of the physical world around it. And the key to that reality was the prophecy they discovered in the cryptic quatrains of Nostradamus, which they twisted to promise a miraculous last-minute victory. As the tide of the war turned dramatically after the catastrophic defeat at Stalingrad in 1943, Joseph Goebbels, the master of propaganda, initiated a desperate search for anything that could restore faith. His team found it in a library in Görlitz, an old book of Nostradamus's prophecies. In its pages, they found, or rather, they manufactured, exactly what they needed. They selectively interpreted the vague, poetic verses to predict, with stunning accuracy, the rise of a great leader from the heart of Europe, a man they named Hister, a barely veiled reference to Hitler. The prophecies, as they presented them, foretold of a devastating war that would bring Germany to its knees. But critically, they also predicted a miraculous, last-minute reversal of fortune, an ultimate victory, the Endsieg, snatched from the jaws of absolute defeat. This wasn't just a hopeful interpretation. It became the central, guiding myth of the regime's final 2 years. Goebbels printed pamphlets with the Hister prophecies and dropped them over German cities. Radio broadcasts spoke of it constantly. It was fed to soldiers on the front lines and to civilians huddled in bomb shelters. This prophecy explains the inexplicable. It explains why, in 1945, with Russian tanks blocks away from the Führerbunker, with the entire country in ruins and the German army all but annihilated, they refused to surrender. It explains the creation of the Volkssturm, which sent old men and young boys, some as young as 12, to the front lines with single-shot anti-tank weapons, believing they were the final prophesied army that would turn the tide. It explains the fanatical suicidal resistance in Berlin, a Götterdämmerung that cost hundreds of thousands of lives for a cause that was already mathematically lost. They were no longer fighting for Germany. They were fighting to make the prophecy come true. The systemic truth is that occultism was the regime's ultimate psychological weapon, turned inward upon its own people. It was a system designed to keep a population fighting to the very end, by convincing them that their suffering was not a sign of defeat, but a necessary, foretold chapter in a story that could only end in triumph. And this pattern is not gone. You have seen it yourself. The leader who claims to be guided by providence, who promises a secret plan, who tells their followers that no matter how bad things look, a storm is coming that will magically set everything right. It is the same mechanism, the same promise of a destined victory against impossible odds. The answer to the question you've been sitting with this entire video is this. Why did they believe? They believed because the truth was a psychological black hole from which there was no escape. The truth was that the war was a catastrophic mistake from the start. The truth was that their ideology of racial supremacy was a barbaric lie. The truth was that the millions who had died, both their own soldiers and the countless victims of their genocide, had died for nothing more than the monstrous ego of a failed artist and his cabal of mystics and thugs. To accept that reality would have required a level of self-awareness and moral courage that they simply did not possess. So they chose to believe in magic. They chose prophecies over casualty reports, astrology over logistics, and divine destiny over the screams of a dying nation. The occult was not their strategy, it was their shield. It was the last thing standing between them and the unbearable knowledge of what they had truly done. The prophecy of a final victory was the most powerful story they had, because it was the only one that allowed them to look in the mirror without seeing a monster. It was the lie they told themselves so they could keep fighting, keep killing, and keep believing they were the heroes, right up until the moment they put a gun in their own mouth. The North Tower of Wewelsburg Castle still stands today, the dark sun mosaic still set in the cold marble floor, silent and empty. The rituals are over, the promises whispered by the stones long broken. The belief in a secret magical path to victory is an ancient human instinct, a flaw in our code that is easily exploited. You see it today, not in castles, but on your screen, in the conspiracy theories that promise a hidden truth only the chosen can see, in the political movements that speak of a great, inevitable awakening that will vanquish all enemies. The language is different, but the promise is exactly the same. Your struggle is not in vain, your faith will be rewarded, and a final victory is destined. The most dangerous lies aren't the ones a government tells its people. They are the ones you tell yourself when the truth is too painful to bear. Tell me in the comments which part of this stayed with you.